On a Monday night in June of 1964, lightning struck the Holland Laundry down the street from my house. In less than a half an hour, the entire building burned to the ground. The next morning, I ran down the block to see, and as I stood at the edge of the rubble, I tried to reconcile what I knew about this vibrant business with what lay before me. There used to be a skylight, but now it was all open sky because the ceiling had collapsed over almost the entire floor. Over there used to be big dryers that were now melted hunks of metal. As I looked into the back corner where the washing machines were, many of them were still intact because the fire didn't completely destroy that area. But everything around them was black, and the daylight glinted off the thick glass eyes of the washers. The weather forecast the day before did not even really mention the big storm that was coming through New Jersey. Partly cloudy, slight chance of showers, said the Bay Times. The paper the next day carried a small story on the front page below the fold. Lightning sets building afire. Avenue A Laundry, one of 7 fires to hit Bayonne. The Newark Star-Ledger, a bigger newspaper with more of a regional focus, talked about the hail size of golf balls in Trenton and the 6 cows that died in Sussex County, but didn't mention the Bayonne fires. Murphy, a Bayonne fireman, lived right across the street from the laundry. He usually went to bed just after 10 o'clock, but the storm made him nervous. As he had since childhood, he was counting the interval between lightning and thunder, and it was getting shorter and shorter. As he watched from his window, a blue bolt of lightning hit the smokestack of the boiler room right next to the building. He watched the blue flame travel down the guide wire to hit the corner of the building, and then it exploded in flames. "Ma, get my boots," he cried out to his startled Mrs. Murphy. "We've got a call." According to Murphy, the fire started at 10:27. Within minutes, engines from 5 different fire companies showed up. The fire was contained by 10:47, extinguished by 11 p.m., and some of the fire trucks stayed until well after 2 a.m. What none of the news stories said, what's not in the historic record, was that the Holland Laundry was my father's business. He owned it since 1943, and for over 20 years it was his life, and it was also something like a playground for the O'Donnell kids. Not during the week when the dangerous business of cleaning was going on, only on Saturdays when just the front of the building was open for intake, for taking in laundry, and for people to pick up, would my mother let us go down, where we could play in the big canvas rolling carts, or climb the stacks, or stick our heads in the giant dryer monsters. As I looked, I could see a group of people in the back of the place trying to salvage whatever they could, where there had been shelves of cleaned and bundled clothes. It was ruined, but somebody found a package untouched. Inside was an heirloom linen tablecloth. Somebody's family heritage had been miraculously saved. I knew who those people were. They were my father's employees. They showed up for their 7 a.m. shift without knowing the destruction that they would find, and were doing whatever they could to help. Something told me, maybe they knew, that their lives had changed. I'd like to tell you what happened to the people who worked at the Holland Laundry after the fire, but I can't. I never really knew. I was 11 years old. I didn't really think to ask. And we didn't talk about it a whole lot afterwards. I know some stories from my older brothers and sisters and what I could find through research. This I can say. I found a death notice for Mary Kislinski. She worked at the Holland Laundry where she made lifelong friends. Mary Kislinski died in 2009 at the age of 89. It meant that she was about 45 when the laundry burnt down and lived another 45 years, and she had made lifelong friends. Like any factory or plant, there was a division of labor at the laundry. People had specific jobs that they did. There were women who worked in the office doing bookkeeping and payroll. There were people on intake, they stood at the counter or they worked in the dock when the trucks came to unload the laundry. There were washer and dryer haulers. There was a machine called a mangle. It's a big combination iron and folder for sheets. 8 people had to work that machine. There were tossers and there were catchers whose fingertips had no feeling because of the hot linen that they would catch. There were wranglers and packagers, folders. People worked hard, and they were glad for the job. There were the drivers, who were a different caste altogether. Sometime in the 50s, my father decided it was better if they became odd jobbers, freelancers. So he gave them their trucks, and he gave them their routes and their customer lists, and they would be responsible for their own business and would earn a percentage of what came in through the laundry. One driver, Bill Schneider, was a good friend of the family. He was exactly 1 day older than my father, born on November 10th, 1912. And he owned a boat, and I can remember that he took us out in New York Harbor one Sunday on his boat. He was not like the other drivers. He was kind of arty, kind of soft, and he didn't really hang out with the other drivers at all. He had a side business where he would go into the New York garment district and buy white goods, linens and things, and sell them to the customers on his route. After the fire, he kept that business up. He gave up driving for the laundry, but kept that business up. Sometimes I would come home from school, and he would be visiting my mother, and he'd have laid out a sheet on the floor, put towels, and cloths, and napkins out for her to select. She rarely bought anything, but I think they both really liked to visit. There were more manly men, at least to me they were giants. John Toby and his brother Charlie, big men. There was a scale that they used to weigh the laundry coming in. If I sat on it, it went up to 60. John Toby could put his thumb on it and get it past 60 easy. If he sat on it, it went almost all the way up to 300, which was its limit. There was another giant, John Hawthorne. He ran the boiler in his white t-shirt and dungaree overalls and work boots. He was like John Henry from the old blues song. John came from the South, not exactly know where. One day he went to my father and said, "Mr. O'Donnell, I need to take some vacation and go down and see my wife and children in Georgia." "Okay, John, sure." A couple of months later, "Mr. O'Donnell, I have to go down to Arkansas and visit my wife and children." And then it was North Carolina. "John," my father said to him, "how many wives do you have?" 7 in 7 different states, 16 children. But they don't know about each other, so let's keep this between you and me. My brother Dave would visit with John. He would come back from Hirsch's grocery store where we would buy our comic books, our Batman and Superman comics. And John loved the comics. One day he borrowed a comic from my brother Dave. When Dave came back to get it, John was laying on the grass behind the boiler building with the comic book upside down. He said, "I can't read a word, but I sure like the pictures." He might have been simple, but he wasn't a pushover. One time he got into a fight with Pete Watkins, one of the drivers, possibly over a woman. Pete said something and pulled out a switchblade, and John pulled out a straight razor. Jesus Christ, I can hear my father saying as he got in between them, right? Here's my 135-pound father standing in between the 280-pound angry boiler room man and a driver with a knife. After the fight, he had to let Pete go. He said it was because of the fight, but all the women who worked in the laundry were really glad, because whenever he brought in a load of laundry, cockroaches that were living in his truck would come in with them. There were mostly women who worked for the laundry. In 1950, New York City Laundry Union did a survey and found that 80% of laundry workers were Negro women, mostly under 35. Bayonne was a little bit different because it was an immigrant town, and it was a mix. There were colored people, people from Puerto Rico, immigrants from Eastern Europe, Ireland. There was Katie. She was a Polish woman. She was really small and slight with shock white hair and really albino-like skin. But she had arms like Popeye. And she could haul wet laundry from the washers to the dryers faster than anybody. There was Anna Boyle, an Irish immigrant woman who had been horribly disfigured as a child. And she kind of had a face that melted in a very thick Irish brogue, so you really couldn't understand what she was saying. But you couldn't really hear much anyway because of the noise of the laundry. There was Margie Handkerchief, that was her name, until she got married. She worked in the office. It was a good crew, and they really appreciated having the job and having that community. There was a terrible strike in 1949 of New Jersey commercial laundry unions, and even though it wasn't long, it was a really nasty strike. There was a picket line outside the Holland Laundry day and night, not to keep scabs out or customers out, but to keep the union goons from going in at night and destroying equipment, which they did at several of the other laundries around town. The White Rose never opened up again. The Sunshine Laundry was almost completely destroyed. Ethel Red, who was the shop steward, said, I'm not going to let those bastards destroy my job. Ethel and her mother were really the heart of the laundry. Even in her 20s, Ethel was a real leader. She didn't like the union, but she saw a need. No doubt she was inspired by Dolly Lother Robinson, an African-American woman who in the 1930s had organized more than 30,000 commercial laundry workers in the New York area. Dolly eventually became Secretary of Labor for the state of New York, and then went on to work for the U.S. Department of Labor during the Kennedy administration. But Ethel didn't like the union members, the reps. One time, she pulled this guy by his tie and looked at him and said, you're not coming back here anymore. Get the union to send somebody else. He went to my father. My father said, hey, that's union business. Ethel's mother also worked there, Mary Reed. She was very different. She came from the South, and she was diminutive and very articulate. She had a page boy bob, kind of like somebody from the silent movie era. She wore jewelry on her arms and rings on all her fingers, but if she saw a rat in the starch buckets where they would go to eat, she could just pull it up by its tail, wring its neck, throw it down, and go back to loading the washers. I don't know what happened to them, but I can say this. When my father died in 1980, Ethel and her mother were the only people from the laundry who came to the wake. They sat quietly in the corner in their Sunday church clothes, paying their respects.